Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
We're joined now by Senator LaTonya Johnson, a Democrat from Milwaukee who's running for re-election representing the 6th Senate District. Thank you for joining us, Senator.
Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to check with you before we launch into some of the other questions. I've noticed on social media you've been encouraging people to wear masks to prevent the spread of coronavirus. Do you think it's gotten to the point with the surge in cases that would you support Governor Evers issuing a statewide mask mandate, or do you think it should continue to be left up to different municipalities to introduce them?
Of course, I would support Governor Evers introducing a statewide mandate, but what we've seen in the past is that anytime Governor Evers issues a mandate, the Republicans are quick to challenge. And with the makeup of our Supreme Court, it's been overturned almost every time. And every time the decision is overturned, he loses power. And so where I would like to see the entire state cooperate with the mandatory mask, we know that that's not going to happen. So it's going to be left up to the municipalities. And unfortunately, that makes it more piecemeal. But we're just going to have to trust that the municipalities are going to do the right thing for their community and require a face mask.
Yeah, it does not seem like he's had a winning streak with the Supreme Court, has he? No. In terms of tax collections, Governor Evers has warned that they could fall dramatically by as much as $2 billion for the year. What do you think should be done to address that shortfall? Would you support cutting government spending or raising taxes and fees to try to offset that loss?
I think definitely COVID-19 is definitely unprecedented. It's something that we've never seen. And hopefully after this, we will never see again. But I personally think that the federal government needs to do more. The federal government needs to provide more resources to the states so that we don't have to cut essential services, especially services that are so important to our future, like K-12 education, or some of the other things that we might be forced to do if we see cuts in government. Nobody wants to lose the services that they've come accustomed to, like sanitation or making sure that our roads, in most cases, at least the potholes are starting to be filled. We want to make sure that there's a level of comfort for everybody. But we all know that COVID-19 is something that we haven't seen before. But the federal government needs to step in and they need to do more. They have to. They have to relieve some of this burden from our states and our counties. It's not fair to expect states and municipalities to deal with this crisis on their own. It's nothing that anyone could have planned for.
Governor Evers has launched his People's Maps Commission to work to draw the new set of district boundaries. Obviously, the Republicans who control the legislature want to draw this next set again. Who do you think should be drawing those lines?
It should definitely be an independent body. We've seen what happened with the maps when the Republicans have drawn them, and we don't need to leave it to chance this time. Constituents deserve to choose who they want to have represent them. And it makes absolutely no sense that so many of these districts are gerrymandered that there's no choice. Even my district is the most gerrymandered district for a Democratic representative. And that's unfair to the constituents that I represent, for those individuals who may not be Democrat. We deserve to have fair, equal, quality races where the community decides who gets to represent them. And the way that the maps are gerrymandered right now, the constituents don't get that choice. And that's unfortunate. And to trust that the Republicans would be able to do it again and this time be fair, I think is very unlikely. So there needs to be an independent body to do that.
Do you support legalizing both medical and recreational marijuana? Where do you stand on that?
I am so all over legalizing marijuana, especially when we see our neighboring states have already done that. If we want to talk about revenue and where additional revenue could come from without having to raise taxes, and particularly property taxes, legalizing marijuana is right there, especially when so many states have already done it. And the revenue streams that come in for those states, it's phenomenal. It's a way for us to stop criminalizing marijuana. It's a way for us to do some good for the state while allowing those individuals who either need it or who want to participate to have the right to do so. And they could do it safely. So I am all for legalizing marijuana.
What do you think the legislature could do to better combat Wisconsin's problems with racial disparities and racial inequalities in the state?
This is huge. This is huge for me because as a person of color, especially as an African American individual, decade after decade, I have seen the disparities in my community not grow larger. When we talk about health disparities, COVID-19 came in and ravished not only African American communities, but our Hispanic communities, the communities of color as well. And that's because those disparities have been allowed to just fester for decades. This is an issue that's very near and dear to my heart, especially when you talk about situations like poverty. For so many of our children, especially African American children, 80% live 200% below poverty level, where only 30% of their white peers live 200% below poverty level. We haven't done enough to address these issues, and we could do more. We could do more by actually wanting to address the issues, and that's the problem. Because a lot of my Republican colleagues, because these issues are not in their district to the extent that they are in my district, it doesn't seem to be much concern there because they don't feel like it's an issue that the rest of the state is experiencing, but it is. We could provide ample amounts of resources to address some of these issues. In the past, we have put some money toward dealing with these issues, but never enough, never the amount that it would take to actually move the needle. And when COVID-19 came, because we never invested enough, we saw it ravish these communities. We saw people die simply because they were diabetic, or they had high blood pressure, or they were asthmatic or obese. These are issues that if they would have been as prevalent as they are in the Black community, if they would have been in the white communities, they would have already been addressed. And it's hard, especially being a legislator of color, to not lose patience and to not just really be frustrated with the way this system has just turned a blind eye to our minority communities as if they don't matter, they don't exist, and if they don't care. It's really hard.
One of the other issues that's come up in obviously at the state capitol and communities around the state is property taxes. And school districts, local governments can levy, what they can levy in property taxes is limited or capped. They can pass a referendum to try to exceed that cap, but that can at times be a challenge. Do you think the property tax cap should stay in place, or do you think they should be eliminated? What do you think local governments and school districts should be allowed to do and not do?
Well, I'm definitely not going to say that the property tax caps should be lifted, because as a homeowner, we want to keep our property taxes as low as possible, especially for those individuals that are on fixed incomes and can barely afford to retain their homes. But we definitely need to have other revenue streams to garner in that additional money, because when you talk about quality public schools, low taxes, the two can't exist together, especially if that's one of the major ways that we fund our schools. We have seen a lot of disparities among our educational system, especially in communities that have went to referendum and have voted to use the referendum as a way to supplement those tax cuts that were lodged against the schools, while other communities didn't have that flexibility to do that. So we definitely need to find a way to keep property taxes low. But anytime you have low property taxes and you talk about money for school, the state is going to have to step up and do their part. If we're going to keep the property taxes low, the state is going to have to fork over more money to make sure that there's some equality there, and to make sure that those schools don't suffer because of low property taxes. And unfortunately, in some of our areas in our districts, we've seen exactly that happen. In those areas where people can afford to pay more, they went to referendum and they've had that done. In more impoverished areas, they haven't had that opportunity. And unfortunately, we've seen that in our disparities among our educational system.
I think we've talked about this next issue at home, but just to clarify for the folks at home on WisconsinEye, in terms of alternative sources of revenue to local government, where are you on the places like Milwaukee levying the half-cent local sales tax as to diversify so they're not so reliant on property taxes?
So I was one of the authors on the Move Forward MKE, and you know, in other cities that are as large as Milwaukee, they don't have to rely so heavily on property taxes, whereas here in Milwaukee, that's not the case. Basically, Move Forward MKE supports allowing Milwaukee County to raise the property tax by 1 cent. And in the first year, that would generate over $160 million that would be shared between Milwaukee County and its other 19 counties. And 25% of that revenue would go toward property tax release and keeping property taxes lower. Of course, this was something that we all agreed with prior to COVID-19. Is something that I still feel that is necessary, but we might have to revisit this conversation after we know exactly what we're dealing with. In Milwaukee, we've seen so much unemployment. We have over 24,000 individuals that are on the eviction list right now as we speak. So we definitely know that this isn't a time to try and raise property taxes or any type of taxes, to be honest. But we still know that there's more that needs to be done in order to help Milwaukee County, in order to help Milwaukee, because we can't continue the way that things were. We were falling desperately into debt before COVID-19. That has only gotten much bigger. The debt is enormous. And so we're going to have to find a way out. And whatever the case that may be, we just can't sustain.
One other area that has struggled is funding for roads and highways, and Wisconsin has for a long time struggled to create a stable funding source for that. Would you vote to raise the gas tax, as Governor Evers had proposed, obviously before coronavirus, but is that something that you would support?
Now, the gas tax is something that I would support. It was something that I supported before COVID-19 because it's a way to make sure that the burden of paying for our roads isn't just delegated to the individuals who live in Milwaukee County or the people who live in Wisconsin, period. It captures even those in anyone who has to fill up their tank. Guess what? You're going to pay your fair share because you're utilizing the roads. And so I think that that's important, that we not just put the burden on those individuals who live here in Wisconsin to repair the roads when people utilize our roads all the time. Everyone should have to pay their fair share. It's kind of like if you go to Chicago, you're going to pay a toll, and those tolls are going to be used to help with the repair of the roads. And so we need that here in Wisconsin. Of course, everything before COVID-19 was so much better than it is right now. And so to talk about doing that right now would indeed be a sensitive subject, but it's definitely something that I supported prior to COVID-19.
The pandemic has hit the healthcare providers in the state quite hard. Do you think the legislature should make hospitals a higher priority in the next state budget?
Yes, ma'am, I do. We have to, because we have seen our hospitals step up to the plate in ways that no one could ever have imagined that they would be on the front lines. And for so many of those hospitals, they lost money because the majority of them make their money through elective surgery, which they had to suspend because of COVID-19. We can't expect them to incur those losses and to not make them a priority. One way that we could have made them a priority and still could is by expanding Medicaid. So if an individual gets sick, you know what, they're free to go to the doctor. They're free to get those regular checkups and to make sure that they're okay, without the fear of hospital bills and without sending these individuals to emergency room or urgent care without any coverage at all, and incur bills that we all know that they'll never be able to pay. And in most cases, the hospitals end up writing off. So that's unfortunate and it's not fair. You know, Medicaid doesn't pay anywhere near the amount of money that private insurance companies pay. So that's a given. But at least we would be sending these individuals into the emergency rooms and into urgent cares with some coverage, which is better than them having to write off 100% of the debt. I have St. Joseph's Hospital in my district, and that hospital has struggled for pretty much a decade. And St. Joseph's is where the COVID-19 hit the hardest when it first came to Milwaukee. And so every day I'm really concerned about the hospital and about their feasibility and making sure that they stay in the community because they are a huge anchor. So without a shadow of a doubt, we have to make hospitals a priority.
Do you think that if a business follows all of the COVID-19 prevention practices and recommendations, do you think they should be immune from lawsuits linked to outbreaks?
I do not believe in blanket immunity. I do not. Because even though we know that there are businesses out there that are going to follow all the proper protocols, they're going to make sure that their employees are safe, and they're going to make sure that, you know, the customers are safe. That's not the case in every situation. It's not the case every day. And it's not the case for every business. So I do believe there needs to be flexibility there, because if we give businesses blanket immunity by saying, okay, if you try and you're not successful, that's okay, you're immune from lawsuits, we're providing a disservice to our constituents, the people that we serve, but especially those businesses. We have seen Republicans weigh heavily on protecting business and the rights of business owners, but not so much the rights of the employees and the customers. So we want to make sure that everybody has a fair opportunity. And for those individuals who may find themselves harmed due to no fault of their own, that they have the ability to sue if necessary. We understand that these are unprecedented times, but nobody should be given a blanket pass.
Do you think that local governments, when they're authorizing public works projects, Do you think that the bidding process should give preference to Wisconsin-based companies?
No, without a shadow of a doubt, yes. Especially now during COVID-19, it is important that our businesses come back, and it's important that they come back strong. And it's important that they have the resources, the money available to hire, because we want them to hire Wisconsinites. We want people to be able to work where they live and to be able to get jobs. You know, in the past, if that hasn't been the case, it should have been, but most definitely now. We can't afford to outsource our business outside of Wisconsin when we have so many individuals right here in our own state that are hurting, that are in need of jobs, especially family sustaining jobs. And our companies are in need of business. So we need to make sure that we make that a priority.
And we're almost out of time, but I just wanted to ask you really quickly what you think sets you apart from your challenger. Obviously, you don't have much time before the primary, but what do you think makes you the best candidate?
What makes me the best candidate versus my challengers is that I've actually done the job, and I have done my job well. I am in my freshman term as a state senator. I sit on the most powerful committee in the entire state, which is the Joint Finance Committee, which is basically unheard of for a freshman, but I did it. I am in leadership. I'm a part of the Senate Dem leadership team. So I think without a shadow of a doubt, I have a proven track record. I passed 13 pieces of legislation this session alone within my freshman year. And one was the first of its kind in the nation, the Green Alert Bill. Just like we have an Amber Alert for missing kids, a Silver Alert for missing adults, we now have a Green Alert for missing veterans who are at risk as a result of their result of their duty or their tours of duty. So that was created right here in Milwaukee for a family, for a military family, for a military veteran named Corey Adams that went missing. His case didn't rise to the level of critical missing until after 8 days until after he had been missing, and he was found 18 days later. He had committed suicide less than 2 miles from his home. And for that family, we were able to create the Green Alert Bill, and I'm so very proud of that. I think that shows the extent as to which I provide service, because I understand with the community that I serve, it's not just about me holding this title, but it's actually about me getting things done. I have an excellent reputation, both inside the building and out, and I use that to my advantage to leverage things for my community. So without a shadow of a doubt, I am the best fit for this seat.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy, and we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you, and you have a wonderful rest of your week, too.
Thank you.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.